night the blood moon rose, the village of Tonkat lay swathed in an eerie, silver haze. Ancient tamarind trees creaked in the chill breeze, their gnarled branches like skeletal hands reaching toward the sky. In the heart of the settlement, the weathered wooden house of Old Man Cho stood silent, a single lantern flickering on the porch. Cho, his once bright eyes dimmed by decades of hardship, leaned on his cane and stared at the glowing orb above. He felt an unsettling thrum in his chest, as though the moon itself were calling his name. 100 paces away, Madame Lin, known to all as the village herbalist, gnawed on her lower lip as she mixed a steaming brew of jujube and mugwort. Tonight was the anniversary of the Great Sorrow, the night when 4 children had vanished into the mist 16 years ago. Every year since, the blood moon had awakened restless spirits, and every year, Lin faced sleepless nights haunted by half-remembered lullabies sung in crying whispers. Across the narrow lane, beyond the bamboo fence that protected the communal well, young Fook raced toward Cho's house, clutching an old, leather-bound diary. The diary had belonged to his grandmother, a woman rumored to have dabbled in forbidden charms. Its pages, brittle with age, held cryptic sketches of twisted symbols and hastily scrawled incantations. Earlier that afternoon, Fook had discovered it hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Now, dread and excitement battled in his heart. Cho. Fook called as he stumbled up the steps. The old man turned, peering at the boy as though seeing him for the first time in years. "What is it, child?" Fook thrust the diary into Cho's gnarled hands. "I found this in my grandmother's house. It speaks of a ritual tied to the blood moon. I think it explains what happened to the children." Cho's trembling fingers traced the faded title, En Hung Bong Ma Contre, the Phantoms of the Young Ones. A chill coursed through him. He remembered that terrible night when the children's siblings Na, Mao, Ben, and little Deo had gone to fetch water and never returned. Their wailing had echoed through the night, and by dawn, only footprints in the mud remained. High above, the blood moon dipped behind a curtain of clouds, casting the village in a fleeting crimson glow. Lin emerged from her cottage, her herbal satchel slung over one shoulder. Dark circles framed her eyes. She had sensed something stirring in the old graveyard beyond the rice paddies. Graves, already disturbed by summer floods, seemed to pulse with unnatural energy. "Cho," she whispered, dipping her head in respect. "What have you found?" Cho handed her the diary. Lin's fingers hovered over its surface, reluctant yet compelled. "These symbols, they're not normal words. They're binding marks, used to tether a soul to the living world." Her voice quavered. "Someone trapped those children here, on the blood moon. They're trapped between life and death." A low howl drifted from the direction of the forest. All three froze. The villagers spoke of a malignant spirit called Ma Suang, the mist revenant that haunted the woods at night, her mournful scream preceding calamity. According to legend, she had once been a scorned bride, who drowned herself in the river when her love betrayed her. Now she roamed, seeking new victims to share her agony. Fook swallowed hard. "If we perform the ritual backwards, undo the bindings, will their spirits finally find peace?" Cho closed his eyes and inhaled the sweet, earthy scent of Lin's tea. Perhaps. But to break the spell, we need the 4 sacred tokens: a lock of hair from each child, a drop of blood from their kin, a tear shed in genuine sorrow, and the ritual knife used to seal the binding. Lin shook her head. The hair we may find in the old shrine chest, but the knife, it vanished with the children. She glanced at the forest, its shadowed mouth yawning wide. Legend says it lies in the hollow of the 100-year-old banyan, at the crossroads where 2 rivers meet. By now, other villagers had gathered. Elder Truong with his iron lantern, young Mai clutching her doll, and the blacksmith Kwang gripping a heavy hammer. The blood moon emerged again, mirror bright, reflecting in the droplets that clung to every leaf. The earth beneath them seemed to hum, as if awakening to some dark promise. "We cannot wait until sunrise," Truong declared. "When the moon sets, the ritual window closes." His voice was firm, though his knuckles whitened around the lantern's handle. "We go at once." A gust of wind rattled the diary's pages, flipping to a chapter marked with a deep red ink blot, "The Path to the Knife." Lin read aloud, "Follow the spirit's lament along the riverbank, into the forest's edge. There, where the banyan stands sentinel, the knife awaits, entwined in roots and bitterness." Fook's heart pounded. If Ma Suang confronts us, can we resist her? He thought of the last time he had seen her face, pale as bone, eyes drowned in sorrow, lips cracked in a silent scream. Cho placed a steady hand on Fook's shoulder. "Courage, child. We carry the pain of the entire village with us." Then, addressing the group, we split into 2 teams. Lin and I will search the shrine for hair and tokens. Truong, Kwang, Fook, and Mai will venture to the banyan. Stay together, trust no one outside your team. As the villagers nodded, the nocturnal choir of cicadas rose to a deafening crescendo. Somewhere, an owl shrieked an omen of the unknown. Footsteps crunched on the dried bamboo leaves as they dispersed into the night, 2 separate parties bound by a singular purpose, to break an unholy bond that had cursed Tongkat for 16 years. Behind them, unnoticed, a pale figure watched from the shadows, her silver hair drifting like mist, her hollow gaze fixed on the villagers' retreating forms. Ma Suang had awakened at last. And beneath the blood moon's watchful eye, she would demand her price. The 2 groups slipped into the night like wraiths, silent, determined, hearts pounding beneath empty lanterns. Cho and Lin retraced their steps toward the crumbling family shrine at the edge of Tongkat, while Truong, Kwang, Fook, and little Mai threaded their way along the riverbank toward the ancient banyan tree. Shrine of Forgotten Cries. Cho's cane tapped against rough stone as he guided Lin through the overgrown courtyard. Vines curled around moss-laden idols, peeling paint revealed pitted wood beneath. In the pale glow of her lantern, Lin's breath caught at the sight of 4 miniature altars, each marked with a faded portrait of one of the missing children. A breeze sighed through cracked windows, as though some spirit exhaled relief at their arrival. Lin knelt before the altar of Na, the eldest sister. With careful fingers, she lifted a fine silk cloth to reveal a small porcelain box. Inside lay a brittle lock of dark hair, bound with crimson thread. As she touched it, a soft melody, half lullaby, half dirge, echoed in her mind, sending shivers down her spine. "Cho, look," she whispered. "We have one." He dipped his head, tucking the lock into a small pouch. They moved swiftly from altar to altar, Mao's hair nestled in a jade comb, Ben's in a lacquered snuff bottle, and little Deo's tangled in the petals of a dried lotus. 4 locks, 4 voices waiting to be freed. But as Lin reached for the last lock, a hollow laugh rattled the shrine walls. The portraits flickered, their painted eyes gleaming with malevolent life. A chill pressed against Lin's spine as she realized they were not alone. From the shadows emerged a twisted figure draped in tattered funeral silk, the spirit of Sister Van, a 5th child who had vanished long before the others. Her gaze bored into Cho. "Why do you awaken us?" she hissed, voice like scraping metal. Cho straightened his stooped shoulders. "We seek to free the innocent," he replied, voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. Van's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Freedom is a lie." She flicked a skeletal finger at the box. "You take their hair but you know nothing of their pain." With a gust of rancid wind, she vanished, leaving behind the echo of her words. Lin's hand trembled. "We need a tear from genuine sorrow," she reminded Cho, recalling the diary's requirements. "But whose sorrow will we pierce?" Cho closed his eyes, remembering the mourning face of old Madame Fung, whose youngest child had died in infancy. "We will go to Chief Fung at dawn. Her grief is true." He folded the pouches into his robe. "Come. We have what we need except the blood." Lin nodded. "A drop will have to come from each of the 4 families. I can draw it safely." They slipped away, the shrine settling into silence once more, as though the spirits themselves held their breath. 2. The crossroads of rivers. Truong led the way through the dense bamboo grove, lantern held low so as not to draw the mist revenant's gaze. Kwang's hammer swung at low readiness, and Mai clutched Fook's coat sleeve, eyes wide with both fear and exhilaration. The path curved inward, guiding them to the meeting point of the Red River and the Black Creek. There, entwined roots of the 100-year-old banyan rose from the earth like the hands of giants. Its trunk was gnarled and hollowed, a natural alcove swollen with centuries of mystery. Fook stepped forward, fingers brushing a carved symbol identical to one in the diary, a circle bisected by a crooked line. He pressed it lightly, and a section of root creaked open, revealing a rusted blade ensconced in writhing tendrils of fungus. The ritual knife. Just as Truong reached for it, the forest fell unnaturally still. The river's murmur died away, insects ceased their calls. A cold presence drifted between the trees. From the shadows, a pale silhouette emerged, Ma Suang, her hair streaming like fog, eyes black hollows. She drifted toward them, her feet never touching the ground. With each step, the air grew colder, breath crystallized in the lantern light. Truong gripped his hammer, ready to strike, but Truong held up a hand. "Do not harm her," he whispered. "She guards this place for a reason." Fook swallowed, clutching my close. The Revenant's voice curled into their minds, "Return what you have stolen, or share my eternal torment." In that moment, Mai began to sob. Fook froze under the banyan's roots, the knife trembled in its nest. The ritual demanded a tear shed in genuine sorrow. Mai's tears glistened in the lantern glow, her sobs echoed like a child's lament across a forgotten year. Truong carefully placed the knife back and knelt beside Mai. "We do not steal," he murmured. "We only wish to end the suffering." He brushed her hair aside, wiping her tears into a clean cloth. The Revenant paused, head tilting as if listening. Mai's tears dampened the cloth. Fook pressed it gently to the knife's blade. A faint pulse of light spread along the metal, and the roots relaxed their grip. With a groan, the alcove opened fully, and the blade slid into Truong's hand. Ma Suang lifted her head. "You have the tokens," she intoned, voice wavering between triumph and grief. "Yet you still do not understand the price." In her gaze, Fook saw countless reflections, every tear he'd ever shed, every fear he'd ever hidden. Then, with a breath that scattered fog like petals, she vanished. The river's song returned, insects resumed their chorus, and the banyan settled in hushed dignity. 3. Convergence and ominous portents. At the village edge, the two groups reunited under the blood moon's crimson glare. Cho presented the 4 pouches of hair and the vial containing blood drawn from Chief Feng's carriage house horses, her beloved mounts. She had offered their first drop of blood in solidarity with the lost children. Lin laid out the linen with Mai's tears, and Truong handed over the ritual knife, its blade still humming faintly with spectral energy. They formed a circle of stones in a clearing lined by tamarind trees. Lin traced the binding symbols on the ground with chalk made from crushed lotus petals. Cho placed the locks at the corners. Fook sprinkled the blood at the circle's center. Mai poured her tears onto each symbol. Truong held the knife aloft. "Now," Cho intoned, "we reverse the binding." With a deep breath, Lin began to chant the words from the diary, a tongue half forgotten by the living, full of sorrow and hope. The air thickened, lantern flames wavered, and the ground shivered beneath their feet. From the forest's edge came the distant howl of Ma Suang, answering the chant. The circle glowed with spectral light, and the pouches of hair unraveled, releasing ghostly figures that writhed and reached for freedom. At the center, the knife sank into the earth, carving a line that cut through the glowing symbols. A deafening wind swept through the clearing, carrying whispers of "thank you" and "be free." The released spirits Na, Mao, Ben, Deo, and even Sister Van rose as shimmering silhouettes before dissolving into the night sky, finally released after 16 years. But as the last echo faded, a new presence drifted forth, a figure taller and more solid than the children, an unseen puppeteer whose cloak billowed like ink. Its voice boomed, dripping with malice, "You have undone my work, but in doing so, you have forged a deeper bond." The blood moon wavered overhead, and the villagers stumbled backward as the figure advanced. Its eyes gleamed with cold fire, searing into Cho's soul. Lin stifled a gasp. This is the one who bound them," she whispered. "The one who summoned Ma Suang to serve as sentinel." Truong gripped his hammer. "Then we finish what we started." But the figure merely laughed, a sound that cracked the night like breaking ice. "You cannot defeat what you have already become part of." Its cloak dissolved, revealing a face both familiar and impossible, Cho's own features, twisted by dark triumph. In that instant, the villagers realized the final twist: the true enemy was not a vengeful spirit, but the curse they carried within, the desperation that had led one among them to corrupt the ritual. 16 years ago. Now, in this blood-drenched circle, the past and present converged, and the line between savior and sinner dissolved beneath the blood moon's relentless gaze. As the figure advanced, the knife in Truong's hand pulsed like a heartbeat. Fuch's eyes met Mai's, and both nodded, ready to confront not only the dark force before them, but the hidden guilt in their own hearts. Under the blood moon's judgment, the final battle had begun. The air had grown thick with tension after the final confrontation beneath the blood moon. Cho's doubled reflection had vanished like mist at dawn, but its chilling promise lingered in every rustle of leaves. The villagers stood in uneasy silence, lantern light trembling on their determined faces. Beyond them, the clearing was littered with spent chalk lines and flickering motes of spirit light, evidence of the ritual and its terrifying aftermath. Lin was the first to speak, voice low but steady. "We broke the binding, but the one who cursed us still walks among the living, wearing Cho's face." She looked to the old man, whose ashen skin and haunted eyes betrayed one small, fatal lie: he did not recognize himself anymore. Cho swallowed, fingering his cane. I remember nothing after the ritual clamp. Yet I feel that darkness inside me, like a wound that won't heal." He turned away, head bowed. "If the puppeteer's soul hid in mine, then killing me won't end this. We must find the maze where he first dove into my spirit and beat him at his own game." Young Fuchs stepped forward, resolve blazing in his gaze. The diary mentioned an ancient temple, hidden by river mist, the labyrinth of whispers. That's where the binding ritual began, before the children were taken. He produced the crumbling map he'd sketched from the diary's margins, a tangle of stone corridors beneath the old city ruins. Mai, clutching her doll's head as if drawing comfort, nodded. There were rumors of a hidden door in the old watchtower. If we can find it, we can follow the tunnels. She glanced at Lin. And those tunnels might also hold the secret to undoing Cho's curse. The group exchanged determined looks. No one spoke of terror or doubt, only quiet acceptance. The final battle would be fought not in open ground, but in cold stone halls where whispers chased them like living creatures. Preparations at dawn. Before setting out, Lin gathered herbs and incense, powerful warding blends of sandalwood, frankincense, and bloodleaf petals. She placed vials of consecrated water in their satchels, and carved protective runes into wooden stakes. Truong hurled a glance at the sharpened stake, hefting his hammer in the other hand. When the whispers come, we strike true. Cho lingered by the shrine's threshold, touching the carved relief of the four children. His voice was almost a whisper, they guide us still. I feel their presence. A faint echo of laughter, playful, innocent, drifted across the clearing, as though the freed spirits urged him onward. Lin laid a hand on his arm. They want justice, not vengeance. We will finish this, together. 2. The Watchtower's secret. 2 hours later, the party reached the crumbling stone watchtower at the river's bend. Ivy strangled its arches, one vast window yawned like an empty eye socket. Fook's torch revealed moss-carved glyphs on the lintel identical to those in the diary. He traced them in the dust, murmuring the ancient tongue. The floor shuddered beneath his palm, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing a spiral staircase descending into blackness. A gush of damp, musty air poured forth. The lantern flames flickered as though startled. Mai swallowed hard but squared her shoulders. After you, she said, stepping aside with a brave smile. They descended single file. The sound of dripping water echoed like slow drums, and the tight stone tunnel felt alive with unseen eyes. Every few yards, Fook paused to touch the map and the glyphs carved in the walls, confirming their path. 3. The echoing halls. At the bottom, they emerged into a vast chamber lit by phosphorescent fungus that clung to damp stone. Pillars scored with blood-red runes formed a circle at the center, and the air was heavy with murmurs, distant voices speaking in half-remembered syllables. The labyrinth had begun. Truong led, axe at the ready. Each corridor branched into 3 more, and each fork bore glyphs matching the diary's sketches, but some paths ended in traps, scything blades sprung from walls, pressure plates that released choking. Black mist, and pits that yawned wide enough to swallow a man whole. Lin moved at Truong's side, chanting warding charms under her breath. Whenever the black mist hissed, she whipped out a wooden stake, driving it into the glyph-carved stones to seal the haunting tendrils. Kwang followed, smashing against any rune-inscribed walls that blocked their way, pulverizing the dark carvings. Fook and Mai stayed close behind, gathering fallen tokens of the curse-shattered dolls, rusted prayer beads, and fragments of iron shackles to carry back as evidence and to sanctify once the labyrinth was cleansed. 4. The Chamber of Reflections. After what felt like hours, they reached the heart of the maze, a circular room with a domed ceiling, enameled with depictions of the blood moon surrounded by specters. Mirrors of polished obsidian lined the walls, each reflecting the travelers' forms but twisted, as if they gazed upon their darkest selves. In the center stood a pedestal carved from bone-white stone, bearing a single leather-bound tome, the original diary of the puppet master. As Joe approached, dozens of voices, a distorted choir, rose from the mirrors, chanting, "Take it, read it, become." Mai gasped as her reflection smeared into an image of the mist revenant, tears of blood streaming down spectral cheeks. Fook's face cracked into a cruel grin he did not feel. Truong's hammer drifted from his hand, as if guided by unseen strings. Lin sprang forward, planting a warding circle of sandalwood ash around Cho. "Do not touch it," she cried, voice echoing off the obsidian. "The diary is the heart of the curse." Cho's eyes flickered between the book and his friend's tormented reflections. Sweat beaded on his brow. "I have to face it," he whispered. "I have to know the truth." The truth unbound. With trembling fingers, Cho flipped open the tome. The pages were scrawled in shifting ink, words twisting and reshaping themselves to reflect his fears. He read aloud. "On the night of the twin tears, I drowned in sorrow so pure that death itself trembled before it. I sought to steal the promise of life, to bind fresh hearts to my pain. I gave them names, I claimed their souls, and I hid the key within my own shadow. Only by tearing that key from my flesh can the cycle end." As the last word left his lips, the mirrors shattered with an ear-splitting crash. Obsidian shards rained down, clattering like skeletal teeth. A spear of crimson light shot from the ceiling, piercing Cho's chest. He fell backward, eyes wide with shock. Lin caught him before he hit the ground, pressing anointing water to the wound. The blood that welled forth was not crimson, but smoky gray ancient ink bleeding from the diary's curse. Cho coughed, gasping as the color drained from his eyes. Fook and Mai rushed forward, helping Lin cradle him. Truong smashed the pedestal with his hammer, breaking the final rune. The diorama of the blood moon on the ceiling cracked, and the specters frozen in place dissolved into motes of light that drifted upward, sighing in release. Cho opened his mouth, voice hoarse but clear. I'm free." He sat up, the gray blood vanishing like mist. "The puppet master was my own grief, my unwillingness to let go of my lost children. Only by acknowledging my pain did I banish his spirit." A triumphant cheer rose from the group. In that moment, the labyrinth's oppressive weight lifted, corridors realigned, and the staircase reformed to lead them back to the watchtower. 6. A new dawn. Emerging into the first pale rays of dawn, the villagers blinked against the gentle light. The watchtower's ivy seemed greener, the river beyond sparkled without dread. Cho stood at the edge, lantern in hand, watching as Lin, Truong, Fook, Mai, and Kwang gathered at his side. Mai placed her hand in his, smiling. "The children can rest now." Cho nodded, tears in his clear eyes. "And so can we." Lin produced the freed spirit's tokens, hair bound in white silk, bloodleaf petals, and purified water, and sprinkled them at the river's edge. The current carried them away, scattering them across the dawn-lit waves like petals on a breeze. As the sun rose, the village of Tongkat awoke to a sense of peace it had not known in 16 long years. But in the hush of dawn, Cho felt a gentle touch on his shoulder, so light he almost thought it a breeze. He turned, expecting Lin, but saw only the empty sky, warmed by the rising sun. Above, a single feather drifted down white as hope, glinting with dew. Cho caught it, folding it into his palm. It was the last gift of the children, a promise that, even in the face of darkness, love endures beyond the veil of life and death. The village of Tonkat had settled into an uneasy peace. Though the blood moon had faded and the mist revenant had vanished, the memory of shadowed corridors and whispered curses lingered in every corner. At dawn, the survivors Cho, Lin, Truong, Quang, Phuc, and Little Mai gathered beneath the old tamarind tree where they first met, their faces pale but resolute. Cho cleared his throat, voice steady though exhaustion marked his features. We have lifted the curse that bound the children and banished the puppet master's spirit. Yet the silver feather remains. He held out his palm. In it lay the delicate plume that had drifted to him at the labyrinth's exit, a gift, or perhaps a warning. The feather shimmered in the morning light, iridescent as dragonfly wings. Lin stepped forward, studying the feather's barbs with care. It is neither wholly mortal nor spectral. It carries a resonance of the other world, a trace of power that binds our realm to the next. She slipped the feather into a glass vial and corked it tight. We must not let this fragment fall into careless hands. Phuc, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, frowned. You mean the curse isn't truly over? Cho shook his head. I believe the ritual severed the puppet master's hold, but the tapestry of fate is woven with many threads. That feather may anchor new spirits or awaken old ones. Truong folded his arms, gaze on the distant hills. Then we need to learn more about its origin. The diary hinted at a greater history, an order of silver-winged guardians who once patrolled the boundary between life and death. Quang grunted. Guardians, you say? But where do we find their traces? Mai, clutching her doll, suddenly pointed toward the northwestern ridge where jagged stones crowned the skyline. They're beyond the old royal roads. My grandmother used to tell of crumbling steps leading up to a temple of glass. It was said the guardians kept watch there. Lin exchanged a glance with Cho. The Temple of Shattered Reflections. Yes, the place where mirrors were forged from pure river crystal. According to legend, every silver feather came from the wing of a guardian whose vigil never ceased. A hush fell. Even the birdsong quieted, as though nature itself awaited their decision. A trek into memory. By midday, the six set out along the rutted path toward the ruins. Phuc and Mai walked ahead, lanterns slung at their backs, while Cho leaned on his cane, Lin supporting him gently. Truong carried his hammer and protective stakes, Quang trailed with a satchel full of herbs and purified water. The road wound through rice paddies still shimmering with morning dew. Children working in the fields paused to stare as the group passed, elders crossed themselves in silent blessing. Beyond the paddy walls lay tangled undergrowth, and the air grew thick with humidity and the scent of hidden blossoms. After 2 hours of steady walking, they reached the foot of the ridge, a steep climb where loose shale crunched beneath their boots. As they ascended, the forest canopy closed overhead, filtering sunlight into emerald beams. Strange vines, dotted with bell-shaped flowers, dripped luminescent sap onto mossy stones. Phuc plucked one vine, examining its sap's glow. "This might be useful for marking our trail," he suggested, collecting a pinch. Higher still, they passed ancient statues carved from pale stone, a line of hooded figures holding broad shields etched with guardian feathers. Time had worn their features away, but the protective stance remained clear, sentinels steadfast through centuries. Mai's hand tightened on Truong's arm. "They're watching over us," she whispered. In the distance, through gaps in the trees, they glimpsed a glassy dome rising above the tree line. At its peak, shards of crystal caught the sun and sparkled like a field of diamonds. The temple of shattered reflections indeed. 2. The gate of fractured light. At the temple's base lay a broad stone terrace littered with broken columns and fractured mosaics. Pools of clear water collected in bronze basins, reflecting the sky in perfect clarity until ripples distorted the image into grotesque shapes. Kwang knelt beside one basin, blowing grains of dust from its edges. "These reflections, they shift, but always come back into focus," he murmured. "It's as if the water remembers its crystalline origin." Cho approached the ornate gate's tall ironwork panels inlaid with shards of colored glass. Each shard depicted a guardian feather, silver, pearl white, sometimes laced with blood-red veins. With a gout of effort, Cho pushed the gate. Years of rust gave way with a harsh screech. Inside, the main hall was vast and silent. Pillars of glass rose like stalagmites, flickering with inner light. The floor, where not broken, lay inlaid with mirror-polished tiles mapping constellations. At the far end stood an altar of clear crystal, atop which floated a cluster of silver feathers bound by a ribbon of moonlight. Lin's breath caught. This is where the Guardians performed their vigil, where feathers were offered to sustain the veil between worlds. Fook stepped closer, enthralled. But why are they left here? Where did the Guardians go? Truong examined the constellation tiles. Look, the patterns correspond to eclipses, comets, and blood moons. They chart cycles of celestial power. Perhaps when the Guardians departed, the cycle broke. Cho turned his gaze upon the floating feathers. And that single silver feather we hold, is an echo of this cluster, a shard ripped by our curse's upheaval. Mai drifted toward the crystal altar. As her fingertips brushed the floating feathers, the air vibrated with a soft hum. The mirror tiles beneath her feet glowed, illuminating a circle of silvery runes around the altar. Suddenly, the hum deepened into a chorus of voices whispered in languages half remembered. The crystal pillars pulsed, and spectral forms rippled between them, phantoms of the Guardians, their winged silhouettes dancing in flowing robes. Their eyes were wells of infinite sorrow and unyielding purpose. The villagers froze. Even the air seemed to hold its breath as the Guardians' voices rose in harmonious lament. Broken is the bond. Blood and light must be woven anew. Lin raised a hand in greeting. We seek to restore the bond. We have undone one curse, but in its place, it left this echo. Teach us how to rebuild the veil. A Guardian's figure drifted forth, taller and brighter than the rest. Its voice was like a chime. To renew the vigil, you must rekindle the 4 celestial cycles, the blood moon, the silver dawn, the midnight eclipse, and the star-born comet. Fook furrowed his brow. We know the blood moon, but the others. How do we rekindle them? The guardian extended a hand, and a silver feather floated off the cluster, landing gently in Cho's palm. Each cycle demands a sacrifice of its theme: sorrow for blood, hope for dawn, shadow for eclipse, and wonder for the comet. Gather the 4 offerings, and the new feather shall soar to seal the veil. Cho closed his fist around the feather. Tell us how. The guardian's form blurred, flickering through several scenes. Silver dawn, a temple at sunrise where a child's laughter must echo across golden halls. Midnight eclipse, a blackened forest clearing where a shadow must willingly embrace the void. Starborn comet, a high mountain pass where a soul must cast a wish upon a falling star. Blood moon, already completed by their ritual, but refined by an act of pure sorrow. Each vision faded, imprinting silver runes upon the air. The guardian's chorus rose one final time: go with courage. We await the rebirth. Then, as the last echo died, the phantoms vanished, leaving only the floating feathers and the mirrored silence. 3. The first offering, Tears of Dawn. Outside, the sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in bruised purples. The villagers emerged from the temple, hearts pounding with the weight of their new quest. Cho turned to his companions. The blood moon offering is complete, but we must perform the other 3 rites before the next lunar cycle 3 nights hence. His voice was resolute. Tonight, we seek the laughter of dawn. Lin produced a small locket containing a recorded laugh Fook's childhood recording, captured on an enchanted pendant that replayed joyous sounds. This will serve as our token of hope, she explained. We must play it at the Temple of Sunrise at first light. The halls in the visions were golden. I believe it lies beyond the eastern ridge. Truong nodded. Then we head east at dawn. Rest now, gather your strength. Tomorrow, we chase a new cycle. Mai tucked her doll under her arm, eyes shining. We'll fill those halls with laughter and bring back the Guardian's watch. As they descended the ridge, the last rays of daylight flickered off the crystal shards in Cho's vial. The silver feather inside glowed faintly, an urging pulse that whispered of trials yet to come. Under the vast evening sky, Tonkat slept unaware that its fate, and that of all worlds, now hinged upon 4 simple offerings: sorrow, hope, shadow, and wonder. And the villagers, bound by courage and ancient promise, would walk the path laid by the silver-winged guardians, chasing echoes until the veil was whole once more. The night air was cool against their flushed skin as Cho, Lin, Truong, Quang, Fook, and Little Mai made camp in a sheltered grove at the eastern ridge's base. Lanterns swung softly in the breeze, casting dancing patterns across mossy stones. The silver feather, now sealed in its glass vial, lay on a flat rock at Cho's side, glowing faintly with pale luminescence. Each heartbeat of its glow reminded them of the quest ahead. They would have only hours to reach the fabled Temple of Sunrise and perform the ritual of Silver Dawn before the first golden rays vanished. Exhaustion weighed on heavy limbs, but no one spoke of rest. The memory of freed spirits and guardians' fading silhouettes spurred them onward. Night of Vigil. Lynn unpacked her herbs, stirring chamomile and bright dawn petal blossoms into a warming tea. "Drink this," she urged, pressing porcelain cups into each hand. The brew smelled of honeyed sunlight, and respiration eased with every sip. Even Truong's stern features softened as he inhaled the floral aroma. Fook sat beside Mai, tracing constellations in the dark sky with his fingers. "Our map said the temple stands on 3 stone pillars overlooking the valley. From there, a spiral ramp carries pilgrims into halls bathed in dawnlight." His eyes sparkled with excitement. "We'll know we're close when the air smells of crushed dew and morning glow flowers. They only bloom under sunlight's first kiss." Cho rose slowly, cane tapping the ground as he straightened. "We leave before midnight," he declared, voice firm. "That gives us enough time to climb, find the pillars, and light the sunrise beacon. Then, as the sun peaks, we play the locket's laughter, and the halls will fill with hope." Kwang loaded his hammer and stakes into a pack. "And if we're attacked by lingering shadows?" he asked, pulling a string of protective garlic pods from Lin's satchel. Lin tucked them around her neck. "The same as always, Faye, warding charms, and one another. Shadows fear laughter and light." Under the towering oaks, they formed a circle. Cho laid his hand atop the feathers vial. "We stand together. For the children, for the guardians, for Tonkat." Heads nodded. In the hush, Mai whispered, "And for courage." The circle broke with determined smiles, and they settled in silence, waiting for midnight's hush. 2. The Ascent by Starlight. At the stroke of 12, they doused the lanterns. Narrow beams from torches cut through blackness as they began their climb. The ridge's path wound steeply upward, roots and rocks requiring careful footing. Dew glimped like scattered jewels on ferns, and once, Lin paused to scoop handfuls of dripping leaves into her water gourd. High above, the sky bled purple into indigo. A faint promise of dawn lingered at the horizon, but for now, stars ruled. As they climbed, stray motes of silver light drifted past a silent escort of nocturnal spirits bewildered by mortals daring to seek sunrise at its threshold. 2 hours passed. The forest opened onto a rocky outcrop. Before them rose 3 monolithic pillars carved from pale marble, entwined with vines of golden morning glow blooms. Between the pillars lay a wide stone platform, etched with sunburst runes that pulsed faintly under their torchlight. Fook knelt to examine one, a circle of rays pointing outward, with 4 empty grooves at the cardinal points. "This must hold the sunrise offerings," he murmured. "Our laughter locket, bloodleaf petals, purified water, and sorrow tokens." He recalled the guardian's words: sorrow for blood moon, hope for dawn, shadow for eclipse, wonder for comet. But the dawn ritual called for hope alone. Mai held the locket close. Then this alone, she said, voice soft but sure. Our hope, our laughter. Lin spread the dewy flower petals around the grooves, their golden edges catching torchlight. Then Fook placed the locket into the central basin. A hush fell, not even the breeze stirred. 3. The beacon of laughter. Cho cleared his throat. Now. At that moment, the horizon's edge flushed pale pink. With trembling fingers, he pressed the locket's hidden latch. A cheerful chime rang out, a child's laughter clear as mountain air. The sound echoed across the valley, reverberating off distant cliffs. At once, the etched sunburst runes ignited in gold light, radiating across the platform. The morning glow vines shivered, their blossoms unfurled, releasing a cloud of pollen that shimmered like flecks of stardust. The trio of pillars glowed, and from each top, beams of warm light shot upward, converging above the valley in a radiant web. In the golden glow, specters of winged guardians materialized, figures robed in luminescent silk, their faces serene as dawn skies. They bowed toward the platform, then raised hands to the sun's first rays. The valley below seemed reborn, birds took flight in flocks of color, and a chorus of wind through pines sounded like jubilant song. But as the light grew, a ripple of something cold and alive stirred among the shadows at the ridge's edge. A shape approached, tall, cloaked in black mist, its form flickering between human and wraith. The Shock Revenant, avatar of shadow, come to challenge the dawn. Truong stepped forward, hammer raised. Back, creature. His voice rolled like thunder. The Revenant answered with a snarl that froze the air, dripping frost onto torch-warmed rocks. Lin whispered an incantation, drawing a warding circle in dust. Flames flickered in torches as though caught in twin winds, one of fire, one of ice. Cho raised his cane, planting it at Fook's side. The feather's vial quivered. Fook gripped the laughter-imbued locket. You feed on despair. He shouted toward the Revenant. But here is hope. With a cry, he flung the locket at the creature. The childlike laughter rang again, magnified 100-fold, wrapping the Revenant in golden ripples. The shadow howled and twisted, trying to flee the sound. Lin poured dew-filled water in a wide arc, each droplet catching light and forming prisms. The Revenant recoiled from each prism's rainbow arc. Strands of mist unraveled from its form like broken webs. Truong drove his hammer into the frozen ground. With a brilliant flash, shards of torchlight struck the dark, and black smoke billowed before dissolving into nothing. The Revenant let out one final shriek and dissipated, leaving only a wisp of smoke that drifted away on dawn's breeze. 4. The renewal of bonds. As the Revenant's echo died, the golden beams from the pillars wove into a single thread of light that arced and fell upon the glass vial containing the silver feather. It glowed fiercely, then pulsed downward through Cho's hand in a wave of warmth. The vial cracked softly, and the feather floated free, its barbs shining with pure gold at the tip. Cho caught it with reverent care. The first feather is reborn, he breathed. Lynn smiled through tears. Hope has prevailed. Fook gathered the morning glow petals, placing them in Lynn's satchel. The next cycle, the midnight eclipse, will demand something darker. We must prepare. He looked to the sky, now streaked with sunrise. But for this moment, the dawn belongs to us. I stepped forward, touching the glowing runes. The guardians watch with us. Their spectral forms lingered in the light, offering silent applause with winged gestures before dissolving into motes of light that sprinkled across the valley like morning dew. Truong lifted his hammer. Onward, then shadow and sorrow await. But we have laughter and light in our hearts. Together, they turned their faces to the sun's golden ascent, renewed in purpose and bound by the courage that only hope can ignite. And so, beneath the silver dawn's blessing, the defenders of Tonkat set forth once more, carrying the first of 4 reborn feathers, and the promise that even the darkest night can yield to light. The tranquil glow of silver dawn still lingered in their hearts as Cho and his companions descended from the eastern ridge. Yet already the shadow of what remained to be done pressed upon them more heavily than any night chill. 3 days remained before the next lunar cycle, the midnight eclipse, and with it the return of the eclipsing shadows that threatened to unravel all they had built. They set camp in a hollow among sentinel pines at the forest's edge, the ground soft with needles and moonlight. Lynn spread out her preparations beneath a lantern: charcoal pouches for drawing sigils, cloves of midnight black garlic, and a small obsidian mirror, the iris of night, capable of capturing a single reflection. Fook and Mai gathered fallen leaves to cushion their resting mats, while Truong and Quang checked the edges of the clearing for lurking threats. Cho sat on a fallen log, weighing the silver feather now tinged with gold at its tip in his palm. "We fought hope in the dawn," he said quietly. "Tonight, we must fight the shadows themselves." His voice, though hushed, carried the weight of their journey. "The guardians told us, at the height of the eclipse, when the moon's light is swallowed, we must offer the shadow of our fear. Only by embracing the darkness within can we bind it." Fook crouched beside him, eyes bright with determination. "But who among us will offer their own shadow? The rite demands the willing surrender of one's darkest fear." He glanced down at his cloak, where a sliver of obsidian from the mirror peeked out. "I know my fear and it waits." Mai perched on a stump, hugging her doll. "I am scared of the dark," she whispered. "But if we don't do this, the eclipse will bring monsters. I want to help." Truong laid a hand on her shoulder. "Your courage is stronger than any fear, child." That night, Lin drew a circle of black salt at the center of the clearing, surrounded by 7 charcoal-bound sigils: the crescent of loss, the orb of doubt, the sea of regret, the claw of grief, the shard of envy, the thorn of loneliness, and at the very heart, the glyph of shadow. Candles of smoked beeswax flickered around the circle. Above, the moon had risen, veiled by drifting clouds that dimmed its glow. "The moon will slip behind the earth in 3 hours, Lin reminded them. "At the moment of totality, the rites begin." She placed the iris of night on a low stone pedestal. First, we must capture our fear's reflection. It will appear, but only if we confront it. Chaotic wind rattled branches as hollow howls echoed through the pines. They shivered, stacking logs to keep flames alive until the end. Cho cleared his throat. I will go first. He stepped into the black salt circle, heart hammering. Under the pale sheen of moonlight, his shadow flickered across the mirror's surface. Cho stared at his own reflection in the iris of night, willing it to show him not the man he saw, but the specter of his buried guilt, the puppet master's whisper that still lingered within his soul. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, behind his reflected image, a darker shape coalesced, a slumped form, head hanging, eyes hollow with despair. A shape of a father who had lost his children, of a man who had tried to bind their souls to his own grief rather than let go. Cho took a trembling breath and spoke to the mirror, voice cracking. Here is my guilt, the darkness I carried when I bound the lost ones in my sorrow. I release it now. His reflection convulsed, the shadow version lifting its head to meet his eyes. Cho held the mirror high, and the shadow stared back, lipless mouth letting out a silent scream. Then, with a low crack, the obsidian surface fractured, and a wisp of smoky darkness poured from the shards into the glyph of shadow at the center of the circle. The air turned cold, and the pine needles around him shook as though a great beast had sniffed the air. Lin rushed forward, chanting an incantation of sealing. The smoky wisp twisted and writhed, then sank into the glyph, where it vanished in a puff of charcoal smoke. Cho stumbled out of the circle, spirit light shining in his eyes. One down, he murmured. Next was Fook's turn. He stepped forward holding a black glass lantern containing a single coal of embers from his father's hearth, token of doubt that had scorched his heart whenever he wondered if he truly had the strength to carry on. He stared into the iris of night, focusing on the faint glow within. Slowly, his reflection shimmered, distorting until only a silhouette remained, a slender boy crumpling beneath an impossible weight, backpack dragging him into the void. He bowed his head. I fear I am too weak for this quest. But if I do not stand, who will carry hope? The mirror image looked at him, eyes empty. Fook raised the lantern high, a spark leapt from the coal, igniting the reflection's chest in living flame. The silhouette let out a crackling hiss as the flame consumed it, and the ashes drifted into the orb of doubt sigil, where Lin bound them in salt. Fook exhaled, nodding. Done. Mai's turn came next. Kneeling, she held her doll tight, tears sparkling in her eyes. I'm afraid. I'm afraid the darkness will take everything I love. She lifted the iris of night to her face, but the mirror did not show her sweet image. Instead, it revealed a monstrous form, her beloved grandmother's silhouette twisted into something grotesque. The reflection held a tiny Mai aloft, dangling her over a chasm. Mai's voice trembled, but she spoke aloud, I will not give you my faith. I trust in our family, in our friends here. She clutched her doll to her chest and pressed it against the mirror's surface. With a burst of warm light from her heart, the reflection shattered, light pouring into the sea of regret sigil before being sealed. Lin guided each of them through the ritual. Kwang and Truong bore their own acts of courage, binding their fear of failure and of violence into the claw of grief and thorn of loneliness sigils. The forest held its breath, shadows fluttering like startled birds between the trees. At the stroke of the eclipse, when the moon slipped wholly behind the earth, darkness swallowed the clearing. The candles guttered, leaving only the black salt circle and the smoldering sigils aglow. A low rumble shook the ground as the eclipse reached its peak. In the absolute shadow, the glyphs blazed one by one, the crescent of loss, the orb of doubt, the sea of regret, the claw of grief, the shard of envy, and the thorn of loneliness flared in succession, then turned to ash. The ashes swirled into the glyph of shadow, which erupted in a pillar of obsidian smoke that coalesced into a great raven, its wings stretched across the canopy. The raven cawed thrice, each cry echoing with the voices of every fear ever cast into the circle. Then, with the final throw of eclipse, a single beam of silvery moonlight pierced the darkness, catching the raven's feathers. The smoke dissolved, drawn into the raven's shimmering form, which hovered momentarily. Its eyes met Cho's, a silent nod of respect for the courage displayed, before it folded its wings and vanished into the night sky. As the moon's silver edge reappeared, the clearing brightened. The salt circle and sigils lay clean, erased of all shadow. Cho retrieved the vial, now empty, and placed it on the altar. From the darkness of the vial emerged a single black feather, the second reborn feather, its barbs glossy as polished night. Lin stepped forward, eyes shining. The shadow has been bound. 2 cycles completed, the blood moon and the silver dawn, now the midnight eclipse. Only one remains, the starborn comet. We must be ready. Fook gently touched the black feather, marveling at its sheen. It feels alive. Truong sheathed his hammer with a decisive click. Our strength grows with each rite. Soon, even the comets will align with our will. Mai looked up at the remerging moon. And when we finish the final rite, the Guardians will return in full to watch over both worlds once more. Under the pale light of the returning moon, they packed their gear and extinguished the lanterns. Ahead lay one final trial, a journey to the highest peak, beneath the falling starborn comet, to offer a wish that would seal the veil for all time. Together, they set off down the pine-shrouded path, carrying 2 reborn feathers and the unshakable courage of those who have dared to challenge darkness and won. Pre-dawn chill clung to the air as Cho and his companions reached the foot of Mount Lac Han, its jagged peak piercing a sky still spangled with fading stars. Below them lay the hamlet of Tongkat, its lanterns like fireflies trembling in the dark valley. Tonight, the starborn comet would pass overhead once more, an omen twice in a generation, and their final chance to sow the last feather of the Guardian's wings. Gathering at the Silver Spring. Lin led the way to a hidden glade on the mountain's lower slope where a natural spring pooled in moonlit silver. The water, they believed, was blessed by the Guardians. Comet's essence would mingle with it, forging the nexus between sky and earth. She knelt at the water's edge, producing a carved jade bowl etched with cometary runes. "Fill this bowl at true midnight," she instructed, The comet's reflection on the spring will charge the waters, our final element of wonder. Fook gathered smooth river stones as stepping platforms, marking a path so they wouldn't disturb the glade's delicate flora. Mai pressed wildflowers into a small satchel, stars in petal form, another token of wonder for the rite. Truong and Kwang paced the perimeter, silent sentinels against wolves or worse creatures drawn by celestial magic. Cho watched them all with pride and exhaustion. 6 trials down and only 1 remained. 2. The ascent of final vigil. By an indigo hour, they struck torches and began the steep climb. Ragged switchbacks carved into sheer rock forced every footstep to be deliberate. High winds tugged at their cloaks, as if testing their resolve. At each twist, the stars wavered beneath the wind's force, and Cho felt the lure of hesitation in his chest, an echo of the puppet master's final whisper. He gripped his cane and pressed on. Halfway up, they paused at an outcrop overlooking clouds lit from below by distant fires, a reminder of mortal life, so fragile beneath cosmic scale. Mai's eyes widened. Look. The comet's tail right there. She pointed east, where a slender arc of light trailed across the horizon. The star-born comet burned sapphire white, its tail unfurling like a banner of ice. Fook raised the jade bowl. Soon, he breathed. Let's reach the spring before its passage. They gingerly descended the final ledge, careful of loose scree that threatened to betray their progress to the night. 3. Midnight under starlight. At last they stood around the glade's spring. Water still as glass reflected a million stars. Above, the comet's head blazed with fierce intensity. Lin set the jade bowl upon a carved stone stand, then stepped back with ritual incense poised to kindle. The others waited in hush, their breaths rising as white puffs in the cold air. When the comet's tail passed directly overhead, a shaft of starlight pierced the cloud canopy and struck the spring's surface. The water trembled and glowed from within, as if stirred by an unseen breath. Lin struck flint and steel, incense smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of frankincense and stardust. A soft chime rang from Fook's pendant. Lin had enchanted it to echo celestial harmonies. The silver light intensified, flooding the glade with unearthly radiance. Cho dipped his fingers into the bowl, the water tingled like liquid lightning. He raised it to the comet's arc, then poured it in a slow, deliberate stream into a waiting crystal vial. As the starlit water filled the vial, motes of light coalesced into a tiny filament of living glow, the final element of wonder. 4. The trials of the comet's heart. But as the water dripped its last drop, the ground quaked. From the forest's edge emerged not beasts of flesh but shapes of pure comet fire, wraith-like figures crowned with comets' tails. They drifted forward, humming with cosmic resonance, guardians of the comet's power. Their arrival signaled the rite's true test, the offering of one's own wonder. Each of the 6 stepped forward. Lin bowed, offering her heart's longing for knowledge. Fook presented his unquenchable curiosity for the unknown. Mai gave her boundless capacity for joy in simple things. Truong pledged his unyielding courage to face the impossible. Kwang offered his quiet loyalty that bound companions through darkness. And Cho, with trembling voice, laid bare his final wish: let the children's laughter, the guardian's wings, and the comet's light guide all souls between life and death. As each vow passed, a wraith absorbed the offering, nodding with ephemeral grace. When Cho finished, all 6 wraiths converged above the bowl, their forms spinning into a vortex of silver-blue flame. The crystal vial pulsed, the filament inside bursting into a starburst that shot into Cho's hands a living feather of comet fire. The weaving of the new veil. With all 4 feathers now reborn blood red, gold-tipped dawn, obsidian black, and comet fire, they gathered at the glade's center. Lin drew the ancient binding circle in luminous chalk, its runes interlacing the 4 elements: sorrow, hope, shadow, and wonder. Cho placed each feather at the cardinal points: north for comet, east for dawn, south for blood, west for eclipse. At the circle's heart, he poured the spring water infused with comet's light. Lin raised her voice in the guardian's invocation. By sorrow we remember. By hope we rise anew. By shadow we discern truth. By wonder we glimpse beyond. Guardians of feather and flame, hear our vow, bind our realms. Let the veil stand evermore. A gale of starlit wind swirled through the glade, stirring petals and runes alike. The 4 feathers lifted, spinning on invisible currents to form a shifting, luminous ring. It glowed with every hue of night and dawn, fire and darkness combined. Then, with a brilliant flare, the ring expanded upward, a dome of shimmering light that blanketed Mount Lakhan and spread across sky and earth alike. 6. A world reborn. When the radiance faded, the glade lay bathed in serene moonlight. The feathers had vanished, their essence woven into the veil between worlds. Above, the comet's tail still flickered, now a gentle trail of stardust crossing a sky renewed. Below, the dark forest seemed less foreboding, its shadows alive with promise rather than peril. Cho lowered his arms, breathless. Lin wept softly, tears of relief and awe. Fook and Mai embraced, their laughter echoing like birdsong. Truong and Kwang clasped hands, their bond forged in every trial endured together. Tongkat is safe, Cho whispered. And the guardians will watch once more. Lin gathered the empty vials and bowls, stacking them by the spring as silent offerings. The veil holds, she said. But its memory will bless us and warn future generations. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, the 6 descended the mountain as the world awoke to a new age, a world where the lost could find their way, where spirits could rest, and where the promise of guardians' feathers would endure in every rising sun, every falling star, and every whisper carried on the wind. And so the tale of the blood moon, silver dawn, midnight eclipse, and starborn comet was sealed in legend and in the hearts of those who dared to believe that light and shadow, sorrow and wonder could be woven into a tapestry that binds all life in harmony. Dawn's pale fingers had barely brushed the rooftops of Tongkat when Cho and his companions stumbled back into the village square, spent but triumphant. Lanterns swung in the breeze like sighs of relief, The rice paddies beyond glimmered with dew, alive again with the promise of harvest. Yet even in the golden light, a flicker of unease rippled beneath the smile of every villager. For though their heroes carried the blessing of 4 reborn feathers, something had shifted in the night air, a resonance too subtle to name, but impossible to ignore. Return of the Guardians. At the heart of the square, Lin raised her voice to call the people together. Word spread fast. The herbalist and the old storyteller, Truong, and Kuang, the young seekers Fook and Mai, and Cho himself stood before the grateful crowd. Cho carefully produced the 4 feathers, blood red, dawn gold, obsidian black, and comet fire, and presented them on a woven mat of white lotus silk. A hush fell. At Cho's signal, a single lantern was lit, then another, until hundreds of lanterns glowed like constellations scattered on earth. Lin poured purified spring water into a shallow basin at their feet. The feathers tingled, lifting slightly in the soft breeze. By sorrow, hope, shadow, and wonder, Cho intoned, voice steady despite his weariness, we have woven the veil anew. May it stand as long as life itself. From the lantern-lit sky above, figures began to materialize, the guardians in full form, no longer bound to phantoms or wraiths. Their wings spread wide, one pair tinted crimson like molten metal, another aglow with warm gold, a third black as starlit night, and the last trailing ribbons of scintillant light like comet's tail. Each guardian descended in silent grace, touching the mat with gentle hands, releasing the feathers into Cho's and Lin's care. The villagers bowed, tears in their eyes. Even the hardest-faced elders felt their hearts lift. For in that moment, the boundary between mortal and immortal thinned, and hope bloomed across every soul present. 2. The Loom of Dreams. As the guardians prepared to return to their celestial vigil, the tallest among them, the Comet Warden, whose wings shimmered with living stardust, paused and lowered a hand toward Cho. Brave mortals, her voice rippled like bell metal, your courage has reforged the veil. Yet a final bond remains to be woven, the Loom of Dreams. She gestured to a silk-draped rack that appeared as if summoned by her will. From behind the silken panels, 2 guardians unwrapped a frame of white bone and silver threads, blinking into existence before the villagers' eyes. This loom holds the tapestry of mortal dreams, the Comet Warden explained, binding each soul's hope and memory. Without its renewal, the veil will weaken when the cosmos shifts during eclipses, comets, or times of great sorrow. You must weave one final strand, your shared dream, united across every heart in Tongkat. Lin stepped forward. How shall we begin? The guardian smiled, a gesture radiating timeless compassion. Each of you carries a memory of this journey, sorrow for the lost, laughter in the dawn, courage in the eclipse, wonder under the comet. Bring that memory here, an object, a word, a token of the soul, and place it upon the loom. Together, you will weave the final pattern. 3. Tokens of the soul. Under the guardian's watchful gaze, the villagers returned to their homes or rummaged through satchels for the perfect token. Cho's group collected. Cho, a lock of the freed children's hair, braided into a knot of pure white silk, symbol of sorrow released. Lin, a sprig of morning glow blossom, pressed between petals that still gleamed gold, symbol of hope rekindled. Truong, a chipped black stake, bound with thorn binds, the instrument he used to seal the eclipse's shadow. Kwang, a shard of crystal from the shattered obsidian mirror, a fragment of reflection conquered. Fook, the laughter-imbued locket, humming softly with children's joy, echo of wonder. Mai, her cherished doll's button eye, once cracked by fear but now whole again, a reminder of innocence reclaimed. Each stepped forward and laid their token upon the blank loom. As they did, spectral threads of light wove themselves around the objects, binding them together in a pattern of interlocking circles and stars. The loom glowed, threads humming like a chorus of distant voices. 4. The weave of unity. The Comet Warden nodded to Lin, who took a silver shuttle threaded with dawn gold thread and began the first pass under Cho's sorrow, over Truong's shadow, through Kwang's reflection. Cho followed with a crimson shuttle, weaving sorrow's red beneath Fook's wonder and above Mai's innocence. One by one, each member of the group took a turn, passing threads of silver, black, gold, and red, until the pattern formed a luminous mandala at the center. All the while, the villagers watched in reverent silence, feeling the warmth of shared purpose. Families linked hands, children whispered stories of the night's trials. Every life present wove itself into the tapestry. The blacksmith's hammer clank echoed in Kwang's reflection, the herbalists whispered incantations in Lin's hope, the storyteller's voice in Cho's sorrow. At the final pass, Mai, trembling with excitement, held up the last thread, a strand of comet stardust spun by the Comet Warden herself. With Cho's guidance, she wove it across the mandala's heart, sealing the pattern. The loom pulsed, and a wave of pure light radiated outward, rolling over the villagers like a tide of serene bliss. V. The blessing and the new dawn. As the loom's light faded, a hush settled so complete it felt alive. The guardians stepped back, their forms shimmering as if in breeze. The mandala on the loom glowed one last time, then dissolved into motes of light that drifted up into the sky, merging with the very fabric of the air. When those motes scattered, the loom and rack vanished, leaving only the empty square where the villagers stood, awestruck. The Comet Warden spoke, "Behold the Vigil eternal. The veil between worlds stands renewed, not by magic alone, but by the unity of mortal hearts. As long as you remember this night, the guardians will watch. Let not fear sunder your bonds." Then, with a silent dip of her head and a shimmering ripple of her wings, she and her attendants lifted into the sky. Their forms vanished in the sunrise's golden edge, but their presence remained a promise woven into every thread of the dawn. 6. Ripples beyond the horizon. In the days that followed, Tonkat thrummed with quiet wonder. The rice paddies yielded greener shoots, the wellspring's water tasted sweeter, even the nights felt softer, as though the moon smiled upon the land. Cho resumed his daily walks, cane tapping in rhythm with his grateful heart. Lin's remedies grew in potency, stories of her cures traveling beyond neighboring villages. Truong taught children the art of protective rune carving, Kwang forged talismans of iron warded with dawn petal blossoms. Fook explored the forest's hidden paths, and Mai gathered wildflowers at every turn, her laughter contagious. Yet the memory of the Vigil eternal never faded. Once a year, on the blood moon's anniversary, the villagers would gather under the tamarind tree, relighting a single lantern and whispering thanks to the guardians invisible above. Some claimed to see streaks of comet fire in the night sky, others heard faint echoes of children's laughter or the soft flutter of feathered wings. Whether spirit or imagination, the bond forged on that sacred night bound the people of Tonkat in friendship and hope. And so the tale passed into legend, a story of sorrow released, hope reborn, shadow bound, wonder embraced, and a final tapestry woven by mortal hands. The guardian's feathers remained, not as physical tokens, but as living promises in every heart that dared to believe in the power of unity. Under the Vigil eternal, the village slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that even the darkest night could yield to the light of shared dreams, and that the loom of dreams would hold, as long as they wove its pattern anew in their lives. Dawn washed over Tonkat in a gentle glow that seemed to sigh relief across every rooftop. Yet beneath the tranquil surface, a new undercurrent of tension rippled through the village and beyond its fields. Though the Vigil eternal had sealed the veil between worlds, the disturbances they had set right in Tonkat stirred echoes in distant lands, places where the boundary between life and death still trembled. I. Whispers on the wind. 2 days after the loom of dreams had been woven into legend, a traveler arrived at the crest of the eastern ridge. Dressed in travel-worn robes the color of storm clouds, he carried a satchel studded with brass talismans and bound books. At first, the villagers watched him with polite curiosity. When he asked for Cho, they led him to the square by the tamarind tree. The traveler introduced himself as Master Quinn, a scholar of ancient rites who followed the trail of comet-born energies. He produced a folded parchment covered in arcane script, maps of ley lines, diagrams of spirit currents, and a hastily drawn sketch of Tonkat's Loom mandala. I witnessed the flare in the night sky, Quinn told Cho and Lin, voice low and urgent. A tapestry of dreams reborn. But such magic cannot remain contained. The threads you wove have tugged at the fabric of distant realms, awakened forces that covet the power to shape life and death. Lin frowned, recalling the peace that had settled over the village. Then why come here? Because the tide is turning, Quinn replied. Where you brought hope, others will seek dominion. There are those who would unweave the loom of dreams, who see the veil as a tool to command spirits. They gather in the ruined city of Kutan, to the west, a council of sorcerers and opportunists. If they harness your feathered magic, they can rend the boundary and unleash chaos. A shiver passed through Cho. The Le folk had long whispered of Kutan, a once glorious metropolis now crumbled by its own hubris. Its rulers had sought immortality by binding souls to their monuments. In return, the city's heart became a prison of tortured spirits. Truong spoke without hesitation. Then we must journey to Kutan and confront them, before they unravel what we have fought so hard to build. Fook's eyes gleamed with both excitement and dread. But we have no guarantee of victory beyond our own borders. What dangers await in those fallen streets? Quinn unfolded a battered map. Tests of loyalty and temptation. Wards broken by sorrow left unchecked, bargains whispered in shadow, and the specter of the Dream Eater, an entity born from stolen hopes. If you walk unguarded, your own memories could betray you. 2. Packing for the unknown. That afternoon, the six prepared for departure. Lynn gathered her satchel of herbal wards and dawn-petal incense. Truong reforged his hammer with runed iron bands for both offense and sealing. Kwang fashioned pendants of silver leaf and obsidian for spiritual protection. Fook stashed his laughter locket and the rune-carved stakes, while Mai tucked her doll into her pack alongside a pouch of wildflower seed, symbols of renewal they might need in barren places. Cho, resting by the shrine, took the single white feather that had once led them to the Loom of Dreams. Before they left, the villagers of Tonkat gathered once more. Old Madame Fung pressed a bundle of protective amulets into their hands. The blacksmith offered up sharpened iron nails to nail wards into doors. Somber faces whispered prayers, tears mingling with reluctant smiles. This time, they weren't just defending home, they were taking hope into the wider world. 3. The road to Kutan. Their path followed the river westward, winding through forested valleys where the land bore scars of ancient battles. Near the foot of the mountains, they encountered the first sign of corruption, a field of withered rice paddies drained of life, stalks blackened by some unseen blight. From the air drifted hollow cries like children singing lullabies out of tune. Lin knelt beside a broken stalk, examining dark sap oozing from its base. "This is sorrow that poisoned the land," she murmured. "Left to fester, it seeps into everything." Cho recalled the rituals they had performed, how each required an element addressed at its source. Without a word, he held the white feather aloft and whispered the loom's binding mantra. "By the thread of unity, we mend the wound of despair. Let hope's breath cleanse the land, and life's promise repair." He swirled the feather above the field. A soft wind rose, carrying Mai's lingering laughter from the locket. The sap glowed briefly with pale light, then dissipated into the soil. New green shoots trembled at the base of the blackened stalks, uncurling in silent gratitude. Truong hammered iron nails into 3 sentinel poles at the field's edge, warding the place against future decay. "One small victory," he said, fingers blackened by iron dust. "But the larger battle awaits." 4. Arrival at the fallen city. On the third day, they crested a hill and saw Kutan sprawled before them, a labyrinth of shattered walls, half-submerged temples, and silent towers. No birds flew overhead, the air hung thick with dust and the scent of rot. A dozen ragged bannermen bearing the council's sigil, a broken wheel encircled by ghostly chains, patrolled the outer walls. Quinn pointed to a gap in the palisade. "They leave it unguarded to lure wandering spirits, feeding grounds for the Dream Eater. We must slip through at dusk, when the gate's wards are weakest." As twilight fell, they advanced, hearts pounding. Lanterns swung at the base of the walls, but the corridors beyond were pitch black. Fook lit a single torch, its flame dancing in his gauntlet. At his side, Mai clutched her doll so tightly her knuckles turned white. Within the city, the air crackled with stolen dreams, fragments of laughter twisted into sorrowful sighs. Ghostly figures drifted along the streets, their faces half-formed, voices begging for release. Cho raised his cane, unveiling a carved bone shard etched with the Loom's mandala. He traced a shielding sigil in the air, and a dome of pale light blossomed around them, repelling the drifting spirits. V. The Council's Chamber. They found the Council's chamber in the heart of the ruined palace, a vast hall lit by braziers whose flames burned blood red. At the far end, 9 hooded figures sat on thrones of broken marble, their eyes hidden beneath heavy hoods. At their feet lay 4 feathers, discarded tokens of their failed attempts to master the Loom's magic. When the party entered, the council rose in unison, robes swirling like storm winds. Interlopers. Intoned the tallest figure, voice echoing in the high dome. You think to challenge our dominion? We have bound this city's souls to our will for centuries. Your childish tapestry means nothing here. Lin stepped forward, voice calm, your chains feed on grief. We offer freedom. She drew the silver leaf pendant and held it aloft. By the bonds we forged in Tonkat, we command the spirits you enslave, be released. A blast of spectral energy shot from the council's thrones, aimed at the pendant. Truong banged his hammer against his shield, deflecting the blast. Kwang hurled his obsidian-tipped pike into the floor, anchoring a ward that snapped with black energy, fracturing the council's spell. Fook unleashed the laughter locket's chime. The hollow sighs of trapped spirits snapped into joyful cries. As the laughter's echo filled the hall, the feathers at the council's feet stirred, glowing with renewed light. Cho raised his feather. By the 4 cycles blood, dawn, eclipse, comet, we reclaim these souls. He thrust the feather toward the thrones. A column of pure light shot up, weaving through the rafters and crashing into each hooded counselor. Their robes peeled away, revealing not sorcerers but hollow husks, once men and women, now empty vessels consumed by ambition. The husks crumbled into ash, and a roar of liberated spirits swept through the hall. Phantoms of children, elders, and ancients freed from the Dream Eater's grip danced in swirling patterns before dissipating into shafts of moonlight. 6. A new guardian rises. In the sudden calm, Quinn approached a fallen throne, on which lay a small, feather-etched crown. He picked it up and placed it on his own brow. I have seen the cost of unbridled power, he said softly. Let me serve as the guardian of Kutan, bound to this place to ensure its dead rest once more. Cho nodded, exhaustion and pride mingling in his eyes. Then may your vigilance be unwavering. Tonkat stands with you. As dawn crept over the palace's shattered rooftops, the liberated spirits drifted westward, returning to their ancestral rest. In the empty throne room, the 4 reborn feathers hovered, then vanished in turn, each weaving itself into the fabric of this fallen city, sealing the veil anew. 7. Homeward bound. Their task complete, Cho and his companions retraced their steps across scarred fields and forested valleys. Each carried with them proof that the Vigil Eternal's magic could hold beyond their homeland. Behind them, Kutana's towers stood silent once more, guarded by Master Quina's watchful presence. When they returned to Tonkat, the villagers greeted them with joyous bells and fresh wreaths of dawn petal flowers. In the square, Lin placed the crown of feathers and beneath it, the rebuilt shard of the Loom's mandala into the shrine's alcove. Cho addressed the crowd one last time. We have learned that hope and vigilance must travel in tandem, that what we forge with light must be protected in shadow. The guardians may have retreated to their heavens, but their promise endures in every heart that chooses unity over despair. As the sun set on that triumphant day, the lanterns of Tonkat burned brighter than ever. In every home, a shard of reclaimed spirit glowed, a reminder that when the gathering storm threatens the world beyond the veil, courage and compassion can still weave magic that endures. And so the story continued, not as an end, but as a living tapestry threaded through the lives of all who remembered the nights of blood, dawn, eclipse, and comet, and the loom of dreams that bound their fates together for all time. Even as the lanterns of Tonkat glowed against the velvet dusk, a quiet anticipation thrummed through the village air. The heroes Cho, Lin, Truong, Quang, Fook, and Little Mai stood at the edge of the square, their silhouettes draped in the soft glow of dawn petal lanterns. Though their victory at Qton felt like a culmination, they all sensed that a final chapter of the saga still awaited them, the forging of a legacy that would outlast their mortal lives. A whisper from the ancients. That evening, as a hush fell over the gathered villagers, Cho raised a hand for silence. From his cloak he withdrew the bone-white shard of the Loom's mandala, now mounted on carved teakwood and wrapped in lotus silk ribbons gifted by the Comet Warden. We have bound sorrow, hope, shadow, and wonder, he began, voice echoing through the square. We have sealed the veil here and beyond. But magic wrought by mortals must be held by mortals. Tonight, we must pass the mantle of Vigil eternal to those who will follow in our footsteps. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Lin stepped forward, bearing the crown of feathers Master Quinn had entrusted to Qtana's new guardian. In her other hand, she held a slender scroll penned in silver ink, the oath of the Guardian's keepers. Any soul willing to uphold our bond may pledge this oath, she explained. Through it, the Loom's power will endure, even should the original six depart. Children clustered at the front, eyes wide as fireflies. Elders bowed their heads, some with tears of pride. Among those who stepped forward was old Madame Fung, her skin like parchment but her spirit unbowed. One by one, villagers, farmers, blacksmiths, herbalists, storytellers all came to stand before the mandala shard and raise their right hands. 2. Forging the collective oath. Under a tapestry of stars brighter than any before, Lin read aloud the ancient vow. By the innocence of dawn's first light. By the strength born of shadow's trial. By the laughter that binds our hearts. By the sorrow that sets us free. I pledge to guard the vigil eternal. To honor the spirits, mend the rifts, and weave the loom of dreams anew. In every time of dread or wonder. As each voice joined, a ribbon of moonlight spiraled down from the heavens, wrapping around the outstretched hands of the crowd. Where it touched, a faint glyph would glow on each pledger's palm, a living sigil that bound them to protect the veil. Fook, excitement and solemn pride mingling in his smile, turned to May. "Our friends," he whispered, "will carry this story forward." Mai nodded, her own small palm glowing with the emblem, clutching her doll as if it, too, were part of the legacy. 3. The first test of the keepers. No sooner had the last syllable of the oath fallen upon the night than a tremor rippled through the valley. Lantern flames flickered and long shadows slithered across the square's stone tiles. A rumble like distant thunder grew steadily louder, and from the forest's edge emerged figures wreathed in pale green mist, spirits of the half-remembered, those the Dream Eater had nearly consumed. Before their liberation, these spirits drifted toward Cho's group, their hollow eyes beseeching, their mournful wails forming a silent chorus that tugged at the newly pledged sigils. The villagers gasped, stepping back in uncertainty. Cho lifted his staff, the shard of the Loom mandala fixed atop it. "Remember your oath," he called. "Speak the words of release." Together, Cho and Lin led the crowd in a refrain. "Be free, be whole, return to the light. No longer bound by grief or night." As the voices rose, the specters trembled. The moonlight ribbons glowed brighter on each palm, and the glyphs sent out pulses of warm light that caressed the ghosts. One by one, the specters sighed in relief, their forms dissolving into motes of silver dust that drifted skyward. By the time the last refrain ended, the forest's edge was silent, and only the hush of grateful stars remained. 4. Passing the flame. In the aftermath, Cho turned to the crowd, breathless but radiant. "This is your charge," he said. "The Vigil eternal belongs to all of Tonkat. May you stand guard whenever darkness stirs." He handed the crown of feathers to old Madame Fung. "Hold this until the next blood moon, and let it pass to the next worthy." Fung bowed, placing the crown gently atop her weathered hair. Truong lifted his newly reforged hammer. "And should the loom need mending, call upon these 6, and we shall return." He tapped the hammer's head, sending a cheerful ring across the square. Kwang added, "But know that we are only mortal, they are the true guardians." He indicated the lanterns still glowing overhead. V. Epilogue, a village transformed. As dawn broke, Tonkat awoke to a world irrevocably changed. Every window bore a protective ribbon of dunpetal silk, every hearth held a small iron charm inscribed with the loom's glyph. Children ran freely through the fields, their laughter a daily invocation against despair. In the temple courtyard, Lin tended new seedlings grown from morning glow blossoms, teaching villagers to nurture hope as a living, growing thing. Fook and Mai walked hand in hand to the riverbank, watching petals drift on the current like tiny boats of promise. "Do you think the guardians will ever come back?" Mai asked softly. Fook looked to the sky, where the blood-red moon still lingered above the western hills. "They're always here," he said. "In every seed we plant, every lantern we light, every oath we speak." Cho, leaning on his cane, watched the siblings from afar, a satisfied smile beneath his white beard. Beside him, Lin placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You've done well," she said. Your legacy and theirs will live on. He nodded, eyes reflecting the sunrise's first golden ray. The light we forged together, he murmured, now guides every heart in Tonkat. And that is better than any magic. And so the tale found its living ending not in a single act of heroism, but in the ongoing act of community. As long as the people of Tonkat remembered their vow, tended their bonds, and shared their stories, the Vigil eternal would endure, carried forward by each new generation, a legacy of light that no darkness could ever wholly consume. Title: Vigil Eternal, The Loom of Dreams. Description: When the blood moon's curse shattered the boundary between life and death, 6 heroes from the village of Tonkat Old Cho, the herbalist Lin, swordsman Truong, blacksmith Kwang, young Fook, and brave little Mai embarked on a series of celestial rites. From the haunting rite of the blood moon to the radiant silver dawn, through the shadowed midnight eclipse and the final starborn comet, they freed trapped souls, bound darkness with courage, and wove hope into a new veil between worlds. Now, as the last moon wanes, the villagers must unite to renew the loom of dreams, an eternal tapestry of sorrow, hope, shadow, and wonder. Their journey takes them from mist-shrouded rice fields to the ruined city of Kutan, facing vengeful spirits and seductive magic, all in a grand tale of unity, sacrifice, and the power of shared dreams.